Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining me for the first edition of Coffee Time. What we're doing is coffee time. We're kicking off our sips. We're kicking off our sips with an 8-week series on the state of managed services in 2026. What organizations need to know. Let me start with an observation, and I want you to be honest with yourself as you listen. Hey, everybody. Hello. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining me for the first edition of Coffee Time. We're kicking off our sips with an 8-week series on the state of managed services in 2020. Hello, hello, come on in. Hey, everybody. How's everybody doing this morning? Come on in. I appreciate those of you who are here. I'm going to give everybody just another minute to come in. Did you guys enjoy that music? That is a song that my brother did. He's a musician. And so, yeah, I thought it was quite appropriate. And I hope you guys like it as much as I do. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for joining me for the first edition of Coffee Time. We're going to kick off our SIPs with an 8-week series on the state of managed services for 2026. And it's about what organizations need to know and what they need to know now. You would have noticed on the previous screen, and you see it on my screen here, maybe that. Our QR code. If you download that, you can scan that QR code to download the Managed Services Playbook for 2026, which is chock full of great information for organizations of any size, really. You'll see commentary by my CEO, Rocky Thurston, and also by my president, DJ Orup. It's a really, really good read, very, very useful. And that's kind of what we'll be gleaming these talks from for the next 8 weeks. I'm not going to take up too much of your time, but I do want to make a quick observation. Give me a second here while I get a little bit acclimated with what I'm doing here. So I want to just make a quick observation. And I want you to be honest with yourself while as you listen to the observation. My observation is that most organizations don't show up to conversations like this just because mobility is broken, although it probably is if they're showing up. But sometimes it's just because they know that something feels off. Um, and that's kind of the root of why organizations start looking into or digging into these conversations is a reason for me to have these coffee times today. So something feels off. Answers are taking a little bit longer than they used to. Bill shock is getting heavier than expected, and it's, well, pretty shocking. And confidence, it feels shakier than it should. Does that sound familiar to anybody that's on now? If it does, if let me just say this and just be frank about it. If none of that sounds familiar to you, then this probably is not the conversation for you. But if it does, then you're really exactly where you need to be. So just sit back, relax. This is going to be interactive. Feel free to comment. As a matter of fact, I would appreciate you guys commenting. I would appreciate you downloading the playbook. If you'd like to schedule a meeting with me, you can always do that on my LinkedIn page. There is a button that says book a meeting with me. So I'm looking forward to digging in with you guys. We're going to be talking today about why managed mobility has returned to the table as a leadership conversation. Because for a long time, mobility, it just kind of lived quietly in the background, right? Like it did its thing. We had our telecom people who were responsible for making sure everything was running smoothly. It worked. It connected people. It was conversational, and it wasn't controversial at all. But what has changed isn't that mobility is broken. What has changed are three things, really: scale, complexity, and the cost quietly. They're all colliding. And I'll talk more about how that's happening. But scale exploded, right? You had endpoints, more locations, more IoT devices, all of these things requiring SIMs. And even if there were Wi Fi, there's still just more devices. Complexity outpaced visibility. So environments grew faster than tracking. And what started as clean became assumed. Can you guys hear me? I'm seeing a lot of pop-ups. I'm sorry. If you can hear me, somebody put a thumbs up in the chat. I certainly hope you can, and I'm not seeing my chat. Hang on one second. Just want to make sure you guys can hear me. Somebody please put a thumbs up in the chat if you can. I'm assuming that you can. And I'll just keep moving forward. So like I said, scale did explode. Complexity outpaced visibility. So your environments grew faster than tracking, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about what I mean by that. And then the cost of knowing went up. And what I mean by that is downtime became more expensive, lack of visibility became more expensive, risk became more expensive. And so all of those things combining into one is the culprit for what's been going on today and the reason for this conversation. When those three things collide, leadership starts to pay attention. And that is why it is now back on the table, right? And that's why leaders are starting to ask questions. So on the next slide, you're going to find that QR code again. It's going to be probably the last time for until the end. Would love for you to download again that manage mobility playbook. And everything we're discussing here, as I mentioned, is going to be gleaned from that. I'll also randomly select 3 people who request a playbook to receive a $10 Starbucks gift card at the end. So I hope that's you. And then you'll be able to join me next week with that cup of coffee, because I think these days that's about all that $10 will get you, right? Is a cup of coffee. So we'll just dig right in. Sorry for all the beeping. Let me turn that down. All right. Okay. So welcome to Coffee Time. As I said, this is just going to be a short peer-to-peer conversation for IT leaders navigating complexity in 2026. This is not a webinar. It's not a pitch. We're just taking a few minutes to stop and sip and talk about why managed mobility has returned as a leadership level conversation and what is driving that shift, so that you'll be well informed. And we'll just jump right in. Thank you so much. So there are 3 things that we're going to talk about today that are going to be the primary reasons or the drivers for that conversation, that leadership conversation. And the first one is clarity debt. And what clarity debt is, I'll tell you what it is, how it builds. We're also going to talk about the cost of downtime, and we're going to talk about the questions that leaders should be asking. So we're going to start with clarity debt. And clarity debt builds, it really builds the same way as financial debt does. It's quiet over time. It's the sort of thing that you don't realize you're paying for until you kind of knee deep in it. So how it starts is that it's growing faster than tracking, because maybe your endpoints, you're adding more and more endpoints, but you haven't necessarily expanded your ability to track them. So speed has been prioritized, but documentation has lagged. And then how it hides, everything looks manageable as you're just adding to your current environment. And then all of a sudden pressure hits. And when somebody asks, especially a leadership, asks a question that should be easy to answer, that's when you realize that you're dealing with some clarity debt. And again, how it shows up is in those shorter answers, heavier conversations, erosion of confidence. And it doesn't mean that that's failure, although at the time it can certainly feel like that. What it is scale without structure. You'll find that a lot of times in organizations that are booming and are growing really fast, they're dealing with clarity debt because they have scale without structure. Okay. And so let's dig in a little bit more on what clarity debt means to organizations. Mobility is back on the executive agenda. Managed mobility has reemerged as a strategic priority, and not just because of devices, but because of, like I said, that lack of clarity, which is a lack of visibility, not knowing what your risks are, and a lack of operational resilience. And so leaders are starting to ask the right questions. And we're just going to talk a little bit more in the future about what those right questions are. But here's how it usually shows up. A financial leader will ask a reasonable question like, why did our wireless spend increase? And IT doesn't panic, but they don't really answer the question. The answer turns into emails or screenshots or calls, and God forbid those long, drawn out, unproductive meetings. Thumbs up in the chat if you know what I'm talking about. I've definitely witnessed some of those in my tenure in this industry. But as I said, it's not a billing problem. That is a clarity problem. Anybody familiar with that? Anybody can, like I said, I would love for this to be interactive, conversational. Feel free to drop a thumbs up or even make a comment if you so choose. And thank you, Michael, for letting me know that you can hear me. All right. So what changed? The new mobility landscape. What or who's the culprit here? Remember, we talked about scale, complexity, and the cost of knowing. Those are the culprits. Most enterprise mobility environments were built thoughtfully for the time they were built in. Connectivity mattered, speed mattered, and literally that's all that connective. Some of our vendors were talking about whether they were wireless or hardwired. Everybody was about speed, right? Nothing was wrong with that. But what changed was scale, complexity, and a lack of clarity. So we love the speed. We love that we're connected, but we need to get this part straight. So lines got added, devices were deployed, SIM cards multiplied, distributed everything, as you see on the slide. People, devices, and applications were permanently dispersed. And I don't know, even though I see businesses pushing more towards getting back into office, there is a level of that that's going to always remain and be permanently dispersed. We've got device sprawl from BYOD lines to contractors with lines, IoT, which is huge. And then we've got wearables. So our endpoints, we've got way more endpoints than we've ever had before, which is causing security at the edge to be much more vulnerable. And then on top of that, you've got budget scrutiny. And then, as with the economy, as things kind of go up and down, that budget scrutiny kind of tightens a little bit. So the more and faster an organization scales, the higher the clarity debt. Next slide. So let's pause for a minute and weigh the costs. And this is the second point I wanted to touch on. I want to share with you a scenario that I have seen many times. I've worked for one of what they call the big three wireless companies, and I've seen this. Organizations with hundreds, sometimes thousands of locations. This is just an example. They'll deploy wireless internet devices at all those locations, which is awesome. But what happens is when one of the locations goes down, suddenly the question isn't whether or not connectivity exists. Well, they might check and everything's fine on the vendor side, but for some reason that location is down. And the question is, which line is it? Which SIM card is it? Which vendor is it? Who owns it now? Because they scaled so quickly, they weren't properly organized, and they didn't have the support in place to deal with those one-off occasions where something like this happens. And make no mistake about it, downtime does cost. Let's put some real numbers behind that. That's what you're seeing up on your screen. Recent data for large enterprise corporations shows that downtime can exceed over $300,000 per hour. That sounds pretty crazy, right? And nearly half of the large organizations exceed $1 million per hour in downtime. And that's especially in industries like healthcare, finance, and manufacturing. And if you look at that minute by minute, critical outages can exceed $14,000 per minute. Can you wrap your mind around that? So now, to be fair, you might be thinking, okay, that's not us. So we can scale it back a little bit, and that's the example that you see under that 300,000 there. Let's just say your organization's downtime cost per hour is $50,000 per hour. Well, if it were down for a full 8 hours, that's $400,000 a day. One location, one incident, one day. That's a few people's annual salaries. So downtime is darn expensive, but a lack of clarity will make that downtime last. And that's where we need to pick up on just some things that we can do to increase clarity and hopefully decrease that downtime or avoid it altogether, right? So this slide is about how complexity drives hidden costs. You've got operational friction. It's slow provisioning and manual work, overwhelmed support teams. You've got security exposure, so policy gaps, unpatched devices, and compliance blind spots, which is really huge in clarity. You see budget leakage, let's call it clarity leakage. But then budget leakage, which is unused lines and over provision plans and an unclear return on investment. All of that matters. And those are where their hidden cost comes in addition to business impact. So when mobility fails, productivity and revenue suffers, right? Businesses are not turning to mobility because they don't need it. They're turning to it because it makes them more productive. And as technology continues to evolve, we're going to need to lean more and more on mobility. quite frankly. So you think things like IoT devices, scanners, cameras, safety equipment, each and every one of them adds more complexity. And with that complexity, unless clarity grows with it, that's how that clarity debt continues to accumulate. So clarity isn't about perfection, it's about confidence. And why it matters most is because we know that at the end of the quarter, you guys finalized your budgets, your roadmaps were set, your priorities were locked, and now you guys are ready to just execute on your plan. The question is whether or not did you plan for clarity? Clarity, again, as I said, it is not about perfection. With clarity, questions are getting answered quickly. Bills make sense, so you're not getting the bill shock. And risk is visible, so you can always plan for it because it's there. Without clarity, everything becomes a meeting, every bill a surprise. And again, like I said, those meetings can be long, drawn out, and unproductive. Next slide is about what questions leaders should be asking. So this is my third and final point. We're going to wrap it up with this one. Questions that leaders should be asking now. Like I said before, we're already in Q1 and budgets are locked in. So the question becomes, did we fund for clarity and not just connectivity? Some other questions that leaders should be asking right now is, do we have true visibility into mobility? What we're paying for right now and why? If something goes down, how quickly can we identify it? Where are our largest sources of inefficiencies and exposures? Like that is a very, very key question. And then if our environment doubles, would clarity double with it? Like plan for this increase in the stretch in your environment and the growth in your environment. So drop a thumbs up in the chat if you guys have witnessed. You see number 1 and number 2 there. Those are scenes for probably your telecom manager's desk, maybe your IT tech's desk. Excuse me. Drop a thumbs up in the chat if you've seen or witnessed the environment depicted in photo number 1. Excuse me. And maybe this is still the case for some of you. We'll take a look real quick at that approach. That's the old approach, right? So cost center mindset, device procurement focus, break fix support. You're very reactive and fragmented in your oversight. But a strategic approach is what we're hoping to, over the next 6-8 weeks, talk about how an organization would pivot to. So you're talking about business enablement, lifecycle optimization, proactive risk management, and unified governance. And this shift should have already happened, but I'm not criticizing anybody if it didn't. That's why we're here right now. So now it's late. It's not too late, but it's late. But later on is going to be too late. The last thing you want to do is find yourself in mid 2026, mid stroke, trying to figure out some of the things that can be figured out right now. So think about those things, guys, and just consider where you are. Are you in the old approach or are you in the strategic approach? Let me pull things together for you before we wrap up. Managed mobility is back at the leadership level because scale has increased. Complexity has outpaced visibility, and the cost of not knowing went up. Today, we focused on clarity debt, cost, downtime, and the questions leaders should be asking. And the reason this matters now is, especially in Q1, is because this is the window to adjust before friction forces the issue. If any part of today felt familiar to you, it's not a red flag. Well, it is. It's a red flag. It's a signal. It's a signal that clarity deserves more attention than it's getting. And so I hope that you take this time to kind of think about where you guys are. This recording will be available on my LinkedIn, so you can come back to it. Again, just want to thank you for joining me for coffee time. Over the next 7 weeks, we'll be talking about cost, security, life cycle, experience, sustainability, and what's next. Next week, we're going to be talking about the true cost of mobility complexity. So definitely weigh in for that one. I'd appreciate you joining me. In the meantime, go ahead and scan that QR code to get a copy of the playbook so you can kind of get a head start on what we're talking about. And I really am curious. You can share it with me now. You can DM me. You can book a meeting. But I'd love to know what questions are sitting with you right now. If you want to drop it in the chat, feel free. But I know, as I mentioned, we try to keep this down to 20 minutes and we're a little bit over. So definitely feel free to reach out to me and let me know. I'd love to know what questions are sitting with you right now. And I'm excited. I will share on within this post in the comments later the 3 people that will get that $10 Starbucks gift card. I'll have your information. I'll be able to share that with you. I do look forward to digging in with you guys at next week this same time. And so join me next week again for our next coffee time. Sips up.